Alright, hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. I am going to be responding to some comments on a couple of my videos, and sorry y'all. This is my favorite, or one of my favorite drinks from Starbucks, the dragon drink. Basically, I don't personally like going back and forth with people in comment sections on my video, but I do want to still respond to some of the, I guess, things that are said that I feel like are not clarified. So, pretty much, I posted this video, how this ectopic pregnancy survived all odds, and it was basically about a woman who had um, a ectopic pregnancy and a C-scar that was in her C-section scar from a previous pregnancy. And she had initially gone to some doctors, and they were all recommending terminating the pregnancy. And basically, she wanted to get a second opinion because she was a pro-life. That's the part of it that I also think people didn't like, that she was a pro-life advocate. And basically, she found a doctor who was specialized in that specific type of pregnancy, who'd had 300 patients who had all survived that pregnancy under this doctor's care, because they specialize basically in taking care of the woman and children in those pregnancies. So she, instead of listening to the first doctor who recommended terminating the pregnancy, she went to someone who had the expertise research, to be able to actually care for her and the baby without, with little. I mean, there's always risk, and I feel like that's maybe the part that people don't like. Like, every pregnancy, there is a small risk of, you know, um, complications, essentially. Like, you can't really predict a lot, but most women don't experience complications in their pregnancy. I also think like medical advancements have lowered the risk as well, and that's why I kind of made the point in the video that, doctors that are fighting to save the lives of both the mom and the children, are actually advancing healthcare, because, making it so it's less of a risk when a woman does experience an ectopic pregnancy would actually be healthcare. You're lowering the risk of death for the woman and for the child, and I feel like that's what we should be pushing for. But people don't necessarily push for those things, because I personally feel like the pro-choice argument pretty much makes abortion the solution to everything. And, when you don't respect or care about or value the life of children in the womb, you are not able to, you're not thinking about anything that would help the child in the womb as well. It's like your main focus is just, oh, we need to make sure abortion's a option for women. And that's why I said it's really disingenuous when a pro-choice person claims they fight for the choice for women to keep their babies. I'm like, no one was ever fighting against women keeping their babies. That's like why it's like, that's not what you're fighting for. And this is the other point I wanted to make. A lot of pro-choice arguments use clever, manipulative language in order to pretend they're not, in order to justify things that really aren't justifiable. But also, it's like a twisted logic you have to have. And I'm going to address two of those things. One being the forced birth myth. So I'm going to get into that argument because that was another, someone had commented something about how women shouldn't be forced to give birth to children they don't want. And this is where like using the language forced birth makes it sound like, oh, these poor women are victims, birth is being forced upon them. By who? But who's forcing birth on these women? And I feel like this is why it's a clever manipulative term pro-choice or pro-abortion people like to use, because it makes the woman who is pregnant sound like she is a victim of her pregnancy, when in reality birth is a natural autonomous function of a woman's body when they are pregnant. Like every pregnant woman will eventually have to give birth, and it's not anyone's choice to give birth. It's literally your body saying it's time for the baby to be born. And it's almost crazy because those people are turning birth, which is supposed to be this sacred, beautiful thing. This is when women, we celebrate birthdays. Do y'all realize, like, every person celebrates the day they are born? The day you are born is a special, beautiful day for the woman, for the children. They get to meet their babies. Like, this is a special, sacred blessing to be able to make it to birth, right? That's why we celebrate people's birthday. It's the day that the world gets to see the child that has been growing in their mother's womb, and we celebrate that when you actually, I guess, care about the life of the children. But I guess what the abortion and pro-choice, and I don't like even saying pro-choice because we're not arguing about choices. You're arguing for the option to abort a child, and a pro-life stance is saying that that's wrong. Anyways, I could get into that in another video. But basically, the myth of forced birth is basically this idea or concept that people who don't want to be pregnant shouldn't be forced to give birth. However, no one is forcing those women to give birth. Once you are pregnant, a pregnancy left alone will ultimately result in the birth of that child. If that woman makes no actions, just allows her body to process and function as normal, eventually that woman is going to give birth, because that is actually the purpose of pregnancy. So basically, your argument that someone is being forced to give birth is really just a manipulative way to pretend like people giving birth to their own children is somehow this massive thing being forced on women. And that's not the actual case. Pregnancy is as natural as breathing, as your heart beating. These are your body. No one chooses, and I think this is also important to make very clear. Once you are pregnant, first of all, no one actually can choose really to be pregnant. Pregnancy, I guess, unless are someone who's trying to conceive or going through IVF, but even those processes are not 100% certain. So there's a lot about pregnancy that is really out of someone's express control. Like, just because someone wants to be pregnant or doesn't want to be pregnant doesn't mean they can control actually getting pregnant or not. There's a lot of things surrounding pregnancy that are out of any individual person's express control. Now, the only way to 100% prevent pregnancy is to not have sex. Like, pregnancy is 100% avoidable. People like to pretend, abstinence or celibacy are not things people are able to do. But in reality, you can a pregnancy is 100% avoidable because you can't get pregnant without having sex. So the option of being pregnant or not does not exist when you are actively participating in sexual activities. That's just being 100% realistic. Now, basically, to pretend that women are forced to give birth, I think, like I said, it's literally just a clever manipulative way to pretend like women are victims when they are pregnant. And just because someone doesn't want to be pregnant doesn't mean that they're forced to give birth. That's what I'm making very clear. Like, I'm not ready to be a mom, or I don't want to be a mom, therefore I should be able to kill my child so I don't have to give birth to it. But that's actually what we're arguing against. We're saying, you can not be ready to be pregnant or not be ready to be a mom. That doesn't mean you have the right to end that child's life, because you're not ending that child's life for any other reason than you don't want the child. You're not ready to have the child. And that's why I made that was actually the whole point of my video. It's like the abortion industry makes women act like their own children are their enemies, instead of seeing their children as blessings, as miracles, as things that should be protected and nurtured and cared for. That's what the abortion industry has pretty much convinced women, that instead of valuing the life of their children, they should not care about their children. They should kill their children, murder their children, abort their children, terminate their children, whatever language you want to use to say it. At the end of the day, it's still ending the life of a unique individual. Every abortion is ending the life of a unique human being's life. And I feel like that's the saddest part about it is, you can sit here and make up any excuse, everything, any option, everything, anything you want to try to justify abortion. But at the end of the day, the truth of abortion is it is mothers murdering their own children or allowing someone else to murder their own children. And that is something I cannot support. I don't care how many straw man arguments people make about it. It is not justifiable. You not wanting a child doesn't mean you have the right to end that child's life. It's almost like saying, oh, because I don't care about my child's life and I want to abuse them, I have the right to abuse my child. It's like the logic in these arguments never applies to any other situation. Like, we don't argue women get to abuse their children because they don't want them. We would say, if you don't want your child, you should have given them up for adoption. But then people try to justify it by saying, well, adoption is this horrible industry, and my child, it's like, you care. And this is where I'm getting ahead of myself. Okay, so let's talk about adoption. So there are people that will argue the adoption industry is abusive to the children who are adopted. That's not true for everyone. I definitely think maybe there are some adoptive children who didn't appreciate or had a bad experience with their adopted parents. And I also think too, it's really hard because adoption exists. A lot of people who are adopted, which I can't speak for someone who's adopted and their experience, but it's like that person is always going to have they're always have a knowledge of their birth parents either not wanting them, or their birth parents wanted them but couldn't afford to take care of them, right? But I also just think, like, to make this argument that someone being adopted means they is worse, that someone being aborted is better than a person being adopted, it's just not an argument I would ever make. But that's something that people who are pro-abortion will say. They'll say, well, the adoption is evil, and those children get abused, and the foster care is evil, and foster children get abused, therefore abortion is the best option. So basically saying someone not having life is better than someone being born and being adopted. Also, the foster care argument has already been debunked because kids don't go into foster care from birth unless their parents abandon them after birth. So if a parent actually was seeking to look for a family for their child to be adopted, that risk of going into foster care wouldn't exist. But at every point, I also want people to understand whether or not a child is abused in the foster system or not is not that child's fault. That is the fault of the person who is abusing them. And you can't, and saying those child don't deserve to live because someone might abuse them is still blaming them for their own abuse and saying it's better if you don't exist than saying these children shouldn't be getting abused, and that's wrong. It's not wrong that they're alive, it's wrong that they're being abused. So there's also just this misplace of blame. I think the person abusing the children is always wrong, and I don't think any form of abuse should be tolerated. And at the end of the day, abortion is abusing. Is abuse. It's abusive to that child. And people don't like if I say that, but that's the reality of it. You know, what's more abusive than killing someone? What's more abusive than ending someone else's life? And so people don't like, I mean, that's the reason that people get mad if you say you're pro-life and you believe abortion is murder, because they don't want to hear the harsh truth or the reality of what abortion is. They want to pretend like, you know, it's not this serious thing. Okay, let me respond to this other comment. So this person basically said, you should look into the history of Black women-led reproductive justice movement. They worked a lot more than just the choice to have a child or not. And she said something about slave women were forced to breed with their slave owners to produce more slave children. Forcing people to give birth has literal roots in slavery. So this is what I would call a straw man argument, because she's talking about a completely different situation than what we're arguing against. First of all, when Roe versus Wade was passed, not one person from slavery existed, because slavery had already ended before Roe versus Wade was passed in the 70s. So this is what I call, this person is basically trying to equate slavery when and this is the part of, like, the slaves were bred, where they were breeding slaves because they saw slaves as being you know, property. They saw the slaves as property and they weren't treating the slaves like human beings. So they were breeding these slaves and they were giving birth to these children. But the thing about it is, I feel like saying this is also not really a full understanding, because yes, slaves were forced to breed during slavery, but it also doesn't mean that those slaves didn't still love their children. And I also feel like if I'm a Black person and my ancestors had to survive slavery, that means I have ancestors who are literally products of those you know, things, of that someone was forced to give birth to those children, and those children, which is a horrible thing. But it's also like, if you would argue that every person who was forced to breed, they shouldn't have been able to, and abortion should have been an option for them. But it's a nonsensical argument, because you're arguing about a time where abortion didn't even exist, and that's actually not even it wasn't even an issue for when abortion was brought to life. So I don't know, but basically every Black person who is has a history of slavery, if their ancestors were slaves, they are literal products of that. So a lot of us wouldn't exist without that having happened anyways. And so I can't sit here and be like, oh yeah, as unjustifiable that is, right? They shouldn't have been forced to produce or forced to breed. A lot of Black people only exist today because those things happen. So it's like a lot of things maybe, and I feel like this is where it's kind of like you don't have the same perspective on certain things. It's like, if my ancestors were slaves And that means somewhere down the line, someone in my family history was a product of those forced breedings. But I still appreciate and am grateful for my life, even if it came out of something that was harsh, because it led to, history of Black Americans who were able to accomplish great things later in life. So yes, it could be wrong that they were forced to breed, but that doesn't mean that I don't appreciate the life that I have as a, direct result, my history, whatever history I have to slavery. If my ancestors were slaves in this country, I'm still grateful that I'm here and I exist, and I'm grateful to have my life. Um, but anyways, that's why I think that's a straw man argument, because first of all, we're not even talking about slavery didn't even exist when Roe versus Wade was passed. So pretending like Roe versus Wade was a issue of these women were forced to give birth or forced to breed with other people, when it's actually women are willingly having sex with people but unwilling to accept the consequences of sex, which is the risk of pregnancy, and then believing because they don't want to be pregnant and they don't want to have a child, they now have the right to kill that child. It's like, it's honestly just really evil when you really think about it, because it's like, your actions created the child to begin with, but your unwillingness to care for, or your unwillingness to value the life of your child, means you get to now murder it. And it's like, giving people who hate their own children the right to kill them is not what it doesn't justify abortion. Giving people the right who don't want to, or this is the other claim, like, if I have to care for a child I'm going to abuse my child, so therefore let me go ahead and kill them now. That's the other kind of side of the argument that people aren't understanding. It's like, well, if my kid goes into the foster system, which your child will only go into the foster system if you were abusing your child to begin with. So you're basically saying, if I have to give birth to this child, I'm going to abuse them. Therefore, it's better if I just go ahead and abuse them now by killing them. Essentially, the argument of not putting a kid up in foster care, using foster children. Oh, they're so harmed and they're so abused, let me just go ahead and kill them prior to that. Also, how do you know? And it's like, you're either saying, I know that I'm going to cause harm to my child if I give birth to them, so let me go ahead and cause harm to them now. That's what we're arguing as the logical reason someone needs to be able to abort their child if they don't want it. Because you're saying someone not wanting a child therefore means they're forced to give birth, when that's not the actual truth. Someone not wanting a child is not what is forcing them to give birth. Someone gets pregnant because they willingly have sex, they don't like the consequence of being pregnant, and now they're claiming, well, even though I had sex, knowing there was a risk of pregnancy, I don't want to be responsible for this child. I'm not ready. I don't want it. Therefore, I have the right to end my child's life. It's out of pure selfishness, honestly. It's about that person caring solely about their needs, their value, not caring about the value of their child's life, that allows women to come up with these types of arguments that in their heads makes abortion justifiable. But for me, just shows the reality that you have to be a very selfish, uncaring person to really believe in these types of arguments as being a justifiable reason to end the life of an innocent human being. You just, honestly, I feel like it all comes down to, you just don't care about the life of the child. And this is where I would actually argue slavery and abortion are related. During slavery, people devalued the slaves. They abused them, treated them as less than, didn't care about their lives. They got lynched, they were murdered, they were killed. No one cared what happened to the slaves because they saw them as property. The same way, women are aborting their children because they see their children as property, that if they're allowed to abuse them, not care about them, they devalue them, dehumanize them, so to make it easier to kill them and to end their lives. That is the similarity, the only similarity slavery has with abortion. It's that we're dehumanizing in a group of people, the unborn, claiming that a mother not wanting their child, not valuing that child, dehumanizing that child, seeing that child as being less than, as not important, gives them the right to end their lives. The same way people who owned slaves devalued, did not care about them, dehumanized them, abused them. Because abortion is abusive. I don't know how else to explain it. When you understand how abortion works, you know, someone ripping apart a child in the womb limb by limb. It's just evil. Abortion is evil. The abortion industry is evil. I cannot support something I know is evil. No amount of arguments people come up with is going to ever change my mind on this, because I know the truth. I'm not lying to myself about abortion being this, pretending abortion is doing some sort of justice for women. If I know abortion is ending the lives of millions of children in the womb. Also, no one ever wants to talk about how Margaret Sanger was a racist who purposely put Planned Parenthoods in black neighborhoods because she wanted to see the black race go extinct. So don't talk to me about how black people need the option to abortion, because no black person has been forced to breed since slavery was abolished in the 1800s. Why are we talking about slavery being the link to abortion or forced birth? That has absolutely nothing to do with what we're arguing about. Black people today are not getting abortions because they were forced to breed with someone. People are getting abortions because they're willingly having sex and don't want to take responsibility for their actions. And honestly, it really just comes down to selfishness. Like, there's no other justifiable. A person who values the life of their child is not going to ever consider abortion. I think that's where it's like, a pro-life person doesn't need the option to abort their child because they are going to fight for their child to live in every situation. The only people fighting for abortion are the people who want the option to be able to kill their children in the first place. I don't need that. That's not an option I would ever consider. Therefore, that's not what I am ever going to fight for. And it's like, that perspective is never going to be understood to someone who doesn't see the value in their own children, or believes they have the right to end the life of their own children simply because they're not wanted. Not wanting someone gives you the right to murder them. That is the moral standard of abortion. If I don't want something, I have the right to kill it. Even if, and it's like, the fact that it's your own child is what, in my opinion, makes it so much worse. You know, you're treating your own children like property. And it's like the same people crying out about the abusive systems that exist outside of in this world. Anytime someone is forcing something abusive on someone, how do you not see abortion as abusive? Like, that's a serious question. How do you not see a woman choosing to end their own child's life in their own womb as anything other than a mother abusing her power over her own child for her own benefit or gain? Like, they're not caring about what happens to that child. It's just, I don't want to be pregnant. Therefore, I'm going to abuse my power as my child's mother and end their life because they're small and they're fragile and they can't fight back. It's like, I don't understand how people don't understand that. Abortion is abusive. Abortion is dehumanizing. Abortion is a human rights issue. a human rights violation, because at every point you're basically saying your right to choose to end your child's life is based off of whether or not you want that child. Not something the child actually did, not because the child actually deserves it, not because, like, simply because the child exists in the womb of a mother who does not want it, that child deserves to die. And my argument is a child doesn't deserve to die because they're unwanted. A child doesn't deserve the death sentence because their mother doesn't want to carry them to term, doesn't value their life, doesn't care about them. And I feel like that is all abortion is doing, is normalizing mothers abusing their children just before they're born. You know? When we see or hear stories of women who, leave their children in dumpsters or abandon their children, no one's thinking that's a good mother. That's a caring mother. But what an abortionist argues is that, oh, well, this wouldn't have happened if they had been able to abort their child. Basically saying the person who abused that child or abandoned that child would have been better had they just gone ahead and killed the child before abusing them, like abuse the child before they were born versus abusing them after. But at each stage, you're still abusing that child. If a mother who abandons their child or leaves them for dead, it's just like you don't create a good moral. There is no good moral that exists within abortion, because all it's doing is teaching women to devalue their children, see their children as enemies, see their children as objects, see their children as property, see their children as being less than, as, calling them clumps of cells, as things that, they can just discard. Like, human life is just discardable. I can never support that mindset. I can't do it. And people have, I guess, I don't know, it's just like I cannot, for me, as someone who cares about other people, I do not understand a mindset that discards human life like it doesn't matter. I don't understand, like, people want me to support something that I know is wrong, and I can't change what I know is wrong. You're not going to be able to change my mind about this, because I've listened to all of the arguments, and not one argument, in my opinion, has ever made it justifiable to intentionally cause harm for a mother to intentionally cause harm to their child unnecessarily. I'm like, when is it ever necessary to abuse someone? When is it ever necessary to cause intentional harm to somebody? Why is it justifiable in abortion but unjustifiable outside the womb? Like, inside the womb, a mother's allowed to cause harm to their child, but outside the womb, they're not allowed. But actually, you now have people arguing that it's okay for a woman to also harm their children after birth, because it's just like the envelope keeps getting pushed further and further. If you can justify the small thing, which is not small, this is what I want people to understand, justifying abortion is justifying abuse of children in the womb, who at the end of the day are human beings. And now people are starting to justify abuse after. Well, I feel bad that that woman had to give birth to a child they didn't want. Therefore, even though they abandoned and put this child in harm's way, they're not a bad person. Because we're normalizing women just not caring about the life of their children. And that's what I'm saying. Like, mothers used to nurture. Mothers used to fight to protect their children. And it's like mothers are turning into, I don't even know. It's just like, it's honestly just so disgusting, I guess, to see and hear these stories, because I can't understand how a person could do something so evil. But at the root of this is selfishness. At the root of the abortion industry and of women who abandon their children and women who abuse their children is they don't care or value the life of anyone else but themselves. So if you support abortion, you're supporting selfishness. You're supporting putting your needs above a mother putting their needs over the needs of their child in every situation, valuing themselves over everybody else, valuing their life over everyone else's, saying a mom's life is more important than their child's life. Like I said, I just can't support something that I feel like is so evil and vile and disgusting and inhumane. I can't do that. Personally, I can't. I can't justify something I know is evil. And what I'm arguing is that if we value both the life of the woman and the child, because a lot of pro-choicers, they only care about the life of the woman. They act like the life of the child is discardable, is disposable. They don't care at all about children in the womb. That's what I'm letting you know. The same way slave owners did not care at all about the lives of slaves. They saw them as disposable. They saw them as objects. They saw them as property. That's exactly how these women are treating their own children. Like they're their own property. Like they're objects. Like their lives don't matter and they can just be discarded and disposed of on any given whim, because they are abusing their power as that child's mother, as being the womb that child exists in. They're abusing their power as the child's mother over their children. And I would argue, if people really want to argue pro-choice, why don't y'all fight harder for women to have hysterectomies? If you don't want children, I 100% agree that you should be able to have a hysterectomy, have your tubes tied, to make sure you never have children. That's the choice. That's a true choice. That is my body, my choice. Because a hysterectomy is you actually choosing to do something with your body, not someone else's. Abortion is literally only fighting to end the life of a child who already exists. You're not arguing for my body, my choice. You're arguing for my child, my choice, which is really just, as this child's mother, I have the right to decide whether that child lives or dies. I also think, even just from a Christian or biblical perspective, it's not a right that you really have. You don't have the right to choose life, because that life existed without your consent. At the end of the day, once a woman is pregnant, that the life of that child was not necessarily that woman's choice. They chose to have sex. Pregnancy happened without them truthfully consenting to pregnancy. You can't consent to pregnancy. It's a natural autonomous function of your body. Like every time you have sex, your body, especially if your body is in, I forget what that state is called, when you're fertile, highly fertile, your body is literally trying to get pregnant when you have sex, because your body sees pregnancy as something that is valuable. Your own body sees your pregnancy and you're having a child as valuable. And this is why I said it honestly goes against the nature of your body to have an abortion, because a woman's body and a woman's womb sole purpose is to protect and nurture the life of that child. Its sole purpose. Your body on its own, without your consent, will fight to protect the life of that child. Your body will start producing 1.5 times more blood in order to support your life and the life of that child. Like a woman's body goes into basically overtime when they're pregnant, trying to protect and nurture that child, because your body sees the value of your child even when you don't. That's why it goes, I said in another video, it goes against the nature of woman. Honestly, abortion goes against the nature of a woman's own body. Um anyways, I think that's all I have to say. Like I said, I just really don't like the disingenuous arguments a lot of pro abortionists make, because like I said, if you really want the choice to have or not have children, then you should fight for women to have hysterectomies. Stop just fighting for women to be able to kill their babies in the womb. Fight for women to prevent pregnancies altogether, have their tubes tied, get a hysterectomy, do whatever, because I would much rather a woman make a choice that only affects their body than make a choice that's literally just ending their own children and pretending like it's equally as good as women who give birth to their children. I do not see death as equal to life. Life is always better than death. I don't know. I'm not going to equate a dead baby and a living baby as both being good outcomes of a pregnancy. If someone aborts their child, that's great. If someone chooses to have their child, that's great. It's just their choice. All these dead babies that exist, okay, they just don't exist. But all of these living, breathing babies, it's just like, how can you see a dead baby and a living baby as being equally great outcomes of a pregnancy? There's a reason people mourn when women have miscarriages. There's a reason people mourn when people lose a child early in a pregnancy or even after birth. There's a reason people mourn when people have stillbirth. But no one mourns for the aborted babies. It's like I said, when you really break it down, the value of life, in my opinion, cannot be honed down to whether or not its mother wants it or not. Like saying someone's life is only valuable if their mom wants to have them, and therefore, only the babies that are wanted get to be born. It's like, what did the baby that existed in a mother's womb who didn't want it, are they actually less valuable than that another baby who exists in a womb where the mother values its life and cares for it? In actuality, in reality, no. It's just like, I can't, like I said, I always overanalyze everything, but at the end of the day, I can't justify, it's not something that in my opinion, will ever be justified. Forced birth is not a real thing. No one is forced to give birth. The same way no one's forced to breathe, no one's heart is forced to pump blood. These are natural, autonomous functions of your body to keep you alive. And the actual only reason women have a uterus is to literally house and nurture and protect their babies. Every life on this planet has to first exist in their mother's womb before you will ever meet them outside that mother's womb. Now, I know scientists are trying to find ways to grow babies outside of a mother's womb. As far as I know, they have not been able to do that. But your body is so unique. It was uniquely designed and created to house and hold, be the vessel of which all life on the planet is able, I guess human life on the planet is able to exist in prior to being born. And like I said, birth is not this negative thing. Like the way people are acting like giving birth is just this horrible experience. Like every person has a day that they were born. Do we forget that the day that you were born is literally the day you celebrate every year of your life? The fact that you're born is the fact that is the reason that we know you are alive, that you are here. You're literally celebrating your life when you're celebrating your birthday. And then to sit here and be like, forced birth, forced birth, forced birth, that doesn't actually exist. It's literally just people being born is the reason anyone on this planet even exists. Because if no babies were ever born, we would have no people. I don't know. It's like I really just don't understand these these arguments. They just are nonsensical to me. They're disingenuous. They're distractions from the heart of the issue, which is that nothing justifies killing an innocent human being whose only crime, I guess, is existing at this point. Because, I can't understand it. And that's why I said the only reason people think it's justifiable is because selfishness. They don't care about anybody but themselves. They don't see the value in their own children. They don't see the value in the life of their own children. They treat the life of their children like it's discardable, like it's disposable, like it doesn't matter. I'm not going to do that with my children. I also think that's the reason why I really don't feel like you can be I'm pro-life. I'm personally pro-life, but pro-choice for other people. It's basically arguing, oh yeah, well, I'm going to make sure my babies live, but if everyone else wants to kill their babies, that's their choice. You know, I personally would never choose to end my child's life, but if other people want to, it's perfectly okay. It's basically like saying, I know abusing children is wrong, so I'm not going to abuse my child, but if other women want to abuse their child, that's perfectly okay. That's not a true moral stance, and it's also very hypocritical. And in my opinion, it's just like you're basically saying your own morals tell you this is wrong, but you're okay with other people doing something just because it's not your children, right? Well, my children aren't being abused, so it's fine. If other people's children get abused, if other people's children are getting murdered, if other people's children, it's like if you don't care about anyone else but yourself, that's how you can be okay with stuff, with harm being done to other people, and just turn a blind eye. Like I said, the root of a lot of these issues is purely just selfishness. If someone only cares about themselves and no one else, they will justify a lot of evil things. That's why narcissistic abuse is a thing. You know, that person truly puts themselves on a pedestal, puts how they feel, what they think, over everyone else's opinion, over anyone else's feelings, over anyone else's value, so that they could justify abusing other people. And it's wrong. Any type of abuse is always wrong. No one has the right to abuse another human being. No one has that right. And that's the argument, I guess, is at the basis of a pro-life stance. Abortion gave women the right to abuse their own children, and I believe that that is wrong. That we're justifying abuse via abortion. And if we ever get to I don't know the statistics, like, are more children being aborted than being born? Because just imagine, like, there's literally more children being killed in the womb than being born. That would be such a horrible reality. I don't know if that's the case. I don't know what the actual statistics are now. But I do know I know a lot more women who've had abortions than women who've had babies. So that honestly could be the case. I don't know. That means a child in the womb is more likely to be killed than to be born. Like I said, I really just don't understand. Well, like I said, the way that I can understand it is, again, people are selfish and they don't care about anyone else but themselves. That's always been what's allowed people to commit horrible atrocities against other people. You know, Hitler was able to convince the Germans that the Jews' life didn't matter, and, you know, they were disposable and discardable. That's how people justify abuse. They literally dehumanize that. They have to dehumanize those people before they're able to commit atrocities against them. Every major human rights violation, slavery, genocides, I forget what was the term used for what Hitler did. I guess it's a form of genocide as well, but I know there's another term that I'm just blanking on right now. But every human atrocity in history arose out of someone deciding to devalue another person's life, and that's exactly what people are doing to justify abortion. And I strongly believe future generations are going to look back at the law around surrounding abortion and history as being one of the worst human rights violations to ever exist. It allows millions of babies to literally be killed. And this is where I feel like if you can understand that a child in the womb is just as alive as a child outside the womb, I don't know what else I can tell you. You know, every stage of your development up until birth and after birth, right? You never stop growing. You are just the most fragile when you're in the womb. That's why you have to cook. You have to cook in your mother's womb, grow and develop enough in your mother's womb till you are strong enough to survive outside the womb. You know, that's why NICU babies exist. You know, if they haven't developed, their lungs haven't fully developed yet. They're so I don't want to cry, but if you've ever seen a NICU baby, they are the most tiny, fragile human beings on the planet, and they're still human beings. You can see a NICU baby at 27 to 33 weeks. They are so tiny, but they still have all their fingers. They're still human beings, and they just haven't fully developed everything yet. They're so fragile. They can't fight for themselves. They value their life like they're alive, they're living, but they're fragile. Like, just because you're bigger and you're already outside the womb and you've already been able to develop all of your organs fully and everything else, you're now better than a human being who hasn't developed that yet. It's just like I don't really understand these arguments that dehumanize or devalue children that are still in the womb, because they're just human beings that haven't finished fully developing yet. All they need is time. Right? And this argument, I mean, all the semantics, honestly, surrounding, calling them clumps of cells or whatever, who cares? We're all clumps of cells. Clumps of highly organized, complex cells that are all working together. Billions of cells in your body all working together to keep you alive. A clump of cells, but a clump of highly organized, complex systems that these cells all work together in one person's body, all for the purpose of keeping you alive. Like, calling a child in the womb a clump of cells is literally just semantics. They're just a lot less clump of cells, because you literally continue developing. Your body is creating new cells every single day. You're creating cells, you're losing cells. Cells are dying as you're creating more. That's how you know you're alive. You're alive because your cells are still working. Until your cells stop functioning, until you take your last breath and your heart stops beating, you have been alive since you were conceived in the womb. The miracle, I feel like, of life is the fact that every person literally started as this tiny microscopic thing develops eventually into every single living human being on the planet. That is what I feel like blows my mind about the human body in general. It's like every single person to exist started as this zygote, whatever process, stage in development, you can call it whatever, but this clump of cells that develops every single system and organ in the human body. And scientists to this day still don't know exactly how this happens. They don't know exactly how your cells know what to create and what organs and what functions or whatever. This is a process that, you know, it stumps a lot of, because there's intelligence in your development from this singular cell being, and I guess you're never singular cell, because as soon as the sperm and the egg come together, you know, and that unique DNA is formed and entropy begins and you start to develop, it's just wild. It's crazy to really think about. Like, I once existed as literally a zygote and a fetus and all of these things. Just because I have no memory of them, I know I had to go through those stages. And I also think too, the argument of consciousness, which I honestly think I need to talk about in another video, because I have a lot of thoughts on that too. I feel like it's just a really dumb argument. Consciousness is not what makes someone alive. If you're alive before you're conscious, then what does consciousness really prove? Oh, anyways, yeah, I just think life is too precious. Life is too short to be willing to cut off life for other people. And I also just feel like, as a whole, if people were less selfish, and if also people made better decisions, because at the end of the day, people have experiencing unwanted pregnancies, are majority of them are actively having sex while not wanting the consequence of pregnancy. And because they're unwilling to make better choices to prevent being pregnant, they believe they have the right to end their child's life because they don't want to be pregnant. It's just pure selfishness at the end of the day. And I've said before why I don't talk about victims of SA in a lot of these arguments, because one, first of all, they make up a minuscule percentage of all of the abortions that are happening. So I feel like it wouldn't even be a rational argument for me to argue against if I am pro-life, because majority of the abortions are not because of that. I'm not gonna talk about the tiniest percentage of abortions to make a case against abortion. I'm going to talk about the majority reason people get abortions, which is not because they were forced to have sex with someone. It is people who willingly had sex, got pregnant, and don't want the child, feel like they can't take care of the child. And the other part of that too is pregnancy crisis centers. These are pro-life centers to help women experiencing poverty, or crisis situations, to support those women during their pregnancy and after, get on their feet so that they don't feel like they have to have an abortion just because they don't have enough money, because they don't have enough support from their families. Like, pro-life pregnancy centers do way more for women and children than abortion ever will. All abortion offers is ending the life. Like, that's all they're offering. Pregnancy crisis centers offer support for those women, offers care for those women, offers support for the children. People donate diapers, wipes, everything, like everything a child might need, formula. There are so many resources for women who are pregnant that pro-life clinics do, so that women don't feel like that's their only option is abortion. I don't know. And that's why I said being pro-life is not you only care about the child, you care about the woman and the child. It's just you're acknowledging that the child's life has value. And I feel like this is where people ignore it because they're like, y'all only care about the babies. Well, the babies are the ones being murdered at the end of the day. We're talking about the human rights violation that is against the children. You know, the woman who died getting abortions, that is equally sad, right? No one's saying a woman dying getting abortions is a good thing, but why does no one ever care about all of the babies that are dying when they're being aborted? It's like just because we are acknowledging the abuse of the children in the womb doesn't mean you don't care about the woman. You have to care both about the woman and the child, because a child's life is still dependent on its mother's life as well. You know, you would want both the mother and the child to exist and be here. But a lot of pro-choicers, they only care about the mom. They don't care about the baby. So when pro-lifers care about the baby, people act like that's all they care about, when that's not the truth. You know, you have to care for both the mom and the baby to be pro-life. You're not pro-life if you are only care about children in the womb. You just care about children in the womb not being murdered as the result of someone not wanting them. So yeah, I think that's all I have to say. Again, I don't want to argue with people in the comments. So I'm probably going to keep the comments either off or just hold them. Like, I don't mind allowing comments, but I also am not going to allow comments that I feel like are disrespectful. I'm also not going to argue with people, because I'm not saying this as a way to argue, more like just pointing out what I feel like are very bad takes on the issue, and pointing out issues I find in a lot of these arguments that I feel like are, you know, basically trying to take focus away. Like, why are we bringing up slavery? Talking about slavery that existed before abortion was even a thing, and saying forced birth, which forced birth in slavery, it really wouldn't have been forced birth, it would be forced sex. These women were being forced to have sex, which is still a problem if you understand sex trafficking. So your actual issue is sex trafficking, not abortion. And in sex trafficking, sex trafficking that exists now is worse, because they'll force victims of sex trafficking to have abortions. So I guess that's my other response to this person's comment that brought up slavery. You know, that's essentially just sex trafficking. And I say that because, like, at the end of the day, birth can't be forced on people, and neither can pregnancy. But you can force. It's the act of sex that gets forced. Pregnancy is not forced upon people. That is an autonomous feature of your body. Your body will try to get pregnant if a sperm reaches an egg. At that point, not one woman has decided, oh, I'm going to make sure this one specific egg in my body gets fertilized by someone's sperm. You don't have express control over that. That's why I'm saying, like, pregnancy and everything that happens after that are no one's choice. You can't consent to pregnancy, nor can you consent to birth. These are the same way you can't consent to breathing, the same way you can't consent to your heart beating. Your body does those on its own without your consent. The only thing you can consent to is having sex or not having sex. And again, I would support my body, my choice if it was about hysterectomies and women fighting for the right to not have children versus the right to abort children. If someone wants to fight to make sure they never have children, by, actually doing something solely with their body, I'm all for that. Like I said, support hysterectomies, support people getting their tubes tied. I support those because that is truly you making a choice for just your body. What I can't support is you making a choice that is ending the life of somebody else. Hope that makes sense. Hope that helps people understand. I'm pro choice if it truly is my body, my choice, when it's actually your body. It's not my body, my choice if it's your child's body. That's my child, my choice. And I wish people would say that because that's what they're actually arguing for. My child, it's my child, therefore it's my choice whether or not they get to live or die. That is the abortion argument. Alright, guys. Peace.